Today we're going to look at the skill of reliability. And when we look at reliability, there are a few types of questions that you may be asked based on the skill of reliability. Of course, the main question is this source reliable? Can you trust what the source says? Does this source prove? Can you believe what this source is saying? And is this source credible? In answering reliability questions, there are two ways you can answer reliability questions. One is through cross-checking, or you might commonly know this as cross-referencing. So cross-checking or cross-referencing requires you to look at the source, what you can pick up from this source, what can you infer from the main source, and looking at another source, finding another source, for example, that has the same inference as what you have in the main source. From there, you can see that the second source actually supports the first source, therefore is reliable. Now, if you actually find another source that has a totally opposite inference as what you have in the main source, then that source contradicts. And when that source contradicts the main source is not reliable. Another way you can look out for reliability is through looking at the provenance. And when you look at the provenance gives you a lot of clues. It actually answers questions like who said this, what was said, why it was said, when it was said. Okay, so all these little things here actually give you clues to whether or not the source is objective. And eventually, if it's objective, it is reliable. If it's not objective, then it is not reliable. Let's take a look at an example here. Let's take a look at source A. So how reliable is this source in telling us about Singapore? So the message of the source or the inference of this source has to be about Singapore. So we take a look here. Futuristic architecture meets large greenery. Okay, vibrant plants, breathtaking views, meticulously maintained parks. Okay, unique blend of urban and natural beauty. If we think about it, what does this tell us about Singapore? Now you can say that Singapore is beautiful or Singapore is lovely. Singapore is a lovely place, right? Now let's just take a look at another source to see whether or not we can find something similar between this source and that. So we take a look at this source here. Again, we are saying that Singapore is a lovely place. Now, if we take a look at source B, we want to see whether or not it actually has the same inference or not. Let's take a look at source B. A rich cultural tapestry, alright, diverse neighborhoods, delicious food scene, colorful streets, tantalizing aromas. Okay, multicultural heritage, cleanliness and safety, welcoming environment, innovative design, and abundant nature. This all also shows us that Singapore is a very beautiful place, or we can also say that Singapore is a lovely place. So because what source B supports what source A says, therefore source A is reliable. Let's take a look at another source that may tell you otherwise. If we take a look at source C right now, we can see that it may not be saying something very similar about being lovely. So now, the first two sources we saw, or the first source, the main source, inference is lovely, we found a source that supports the main source. But let's take a look at this source that may contradict. So we're going to look, does this tell me that Singapore is a lovely place? Let's take a look. Some might find less appealing. Most expensive places to live. The emphasis on rules and regulations. Okay, restrictive to some. Okay, significant fines for minor offenses. Okay, creates an environment that is overly controlled, less spontaneous. Okay, potentially overshadowing other aspects of life and culture because of economic growth. Now, when we take a look at this, definitely it shows us that Singapore is not a very attractive place. So it is not attractive, it is not lovely. Not lovely. So because it goes totally against what source A says, it contradicts source A. And because it contradicts source A, the two information does not corroborate. And as a result of that, source A is not reliable. So this is how you can use cross-checking or cross-referencing to other sources to help you pick up whether or not this source is reliable or not. Just a quick note. For social studies, you don't really have contextual knowledge to turn to, because in a social studies source-based case study, generally you might receive something that may not be a contextualized source-based case study, meaning that it might be something that you have never seen before. But as long as it's based on either one of the issues, you will be able to be tested on it. But you may not have prior knowledge about it. However, for history, in terms of the source-based case study, it is always contextualized to a particular topic. For example, things like the rise of Hitler, or maybe, for example, the impact of Hitler's rule, reasons for the outbreak of World War II, okay, etc. So in terms of history, you can cross-refer to contextual knowledge to check the reliability of the source. But in terms of SS, it's a bit tougher. So I would not recommend that. Now let's take a look. Let's go back to source A again. Now, as I mentioned, the first way is to cross-refer. The second way is to look at the provenance. And does the provenance give us some clues about whether the source is reliable or not? Let's take a look at it. Now, this is made by a Singaporean minister. What do you think a Singaporean minister would say? You know, would he say things like Singapore is very ugly, Singapore is very ill, I don't like to stay in Singapore? No, the minister is expected, okay, he's expected to say good things about Singapore. And if you look at this entire source, it is very one-sided. Okay, because it actually only tells you the good stuff about Singapore. Doesn't really tell you about the bad things, right? It's only tell you about the good stuff here. So you expect to say good things about Singapore. It is one-sided. It is good. And why does he say these kind of things? Because he wants to, okay, attract people to visit Singapore. Or you may say it to attract more foreigners to live in Singapore. Okay, this could be also another reason. So in this case here, number one, you're looking at the provenance itself. You break down the provenance, you analyze the provenance, and you get something like this. Secondly, after looking at the provenance, we look at the purpose of the source. What exactly is the purpose of the minister saying something like this? Now, if we can pick out a purpose that is very clear, a motive that's very clear, together with what we have picked out in number one, which is what a minister would expected to say. Now, in this case here, the source becomes it becomes not objective, it becomes very one-sided, and because of that, the credibility of the source, the objectivity of the source is questioned, and as such, the source is not reliable. So remember, when we're looking at reliability, there are two ways around it. One, to cross-check or cross-reference. The second is to look at the provenance, and if there is, a purpose as well. Alright, till the next time.